My husband leaves a glass of water on my nightstand every night. Last night, it was already there when he got home. I'm writing this from my car in a grocery store parking lot at 11:47 p.m. My phone is at 23% battery. My hands won't stop shaking. 45 minutes ago, I called the police to report an intruder in my house. They searched every room, every closet, checked all the windows and doors. Everything was locked from the inside. Nothing was missing, no signs of forced entry. The officers looked at me like I was crazy, and maybe I am. But I know what I saw. For 8 years exactly, my husband has left a glass of water on my nightstand every single night before bed. It's our thing, our ritual. Tonight, he's on a business trip 3 states away. I got home at 10 p.m. to an empty locked house, and the glass of water was already there. Fresh, cold, condensation still forming on the outside. So either someone has a key to my house and is recreating my husband's nightly routine for reasons I can't understand, or, or something else is happening that I'm not ready to accept. I need to write this down before I lose my nerve, before I convince myself I imagined it. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you're new here, I explore the darkest psychological mysteries hidden in everyday life through real stories from Reddit and beyond. Make sure you hit that subscribe button because this one is going to mess with your head in ways you won't see coming. This is about patterns, about the rituals that define our relationships, and about what happens when those patterns continue without the person who created them. Trust me when I say you need to hear this all the way through. Now let's dive in. The original poster, we'll call her Sarah, though that's not her real name, begins her story 8 years ago on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday night. Sarah was 31 at the time, a middle school English teacher in a small town in Vermont, the kind of town where everyone knows everyone, where the local diner still has a jukebox that actually works, where autumn feels like it was invented just for the maple trees lining Main Street. She'd been married to her husband, James, for 3 years. They'd met in grad school. He was studying architecture. She was getting her teaching certification. He had this quiet, thoughtful way about him. He was the kind of person who noticed things. When you got a haircut, when you seemed tired, when you needed someone to just listen without trying to fix everything. James had a lot of small rituals. He arranged his keys in the same order on the hook every day. Car, house, office. He folded his socks in a specific way, not just matched, but folded with the toes tucked in just so. He tapped his coffee mug twice before taking his first sip every morning. Sarah found these habits endearing, the small anchors that made him feel like home. But the water glass ritual was different, more intentional. It started by accident. Sarah had been sick with a terrible flu, the kind that leaves you alternating between fever sweats and chills. She'd wake up in the middle of the night desperately thirsty, barely able to make it to the bathroom, let alone downstairs to the kitchen. James started leaving a glass of water on her nightstand before bed, fresh and cold, within easy reach. When she recovered, he kept doing it. "Don't you want me to get it myself?" Sarah had asked one night, watching him place the glass carefully on the nightstand, right next to her reading lamp. "I like doing it," James had said simply. "It makes me feel like I'm taking care of you, even in this small way." And so it became their thing. Every single night for 8 years, without fail, James would fill a glass with cold water, always from the filtered pitcher in the fridge, never from the tap, and place it on Sarah's nightstand. Not his side of the bed, hers, always hers. If they went on vacation, he'd fill a glass in the hotel room. If they stayed at a friend's house, he'd quietly slip away before bed to find a glass and fill it. If they had a fight, and they did occasionally, the normal friction of two people building a life together, he'd still leave the water. Sometimes it felt like a peace offering. Sometimes it felt like a promise. I'm still here. I still care, even when things are hard. Sarah grew to depend on it in a way she couldn't fully articulate. It wasn't about the water itself. She could easily get her own water, obviously. It was about the consistency, the knowledge that no matter what happened during the day, no matter how chaotic or stressful or overwhelming life became, That glass would be there. James would be there. It was love distilled into a simple, repeatable act. Sarah describes their life as comfortable, not passionate in the way movies depict. No grand romantic gestures, no dramatic declarations, but solid, warm. They had their routines. Sunday morning pancakes that James always burned slightly around the edges. Thursday night Thai food takeout from the same restaurant. Evening walks with their border collie, Pepper, who had an obsession with chasing squirrels she'd never catch. James worked as a project manager for a construction firm. He traveled occasionally for work, usually just a day or two, sometimes up to a week. When he traveled, he'd call Sarah before bed, and he'd always say the same thing. "Did you remember to get water?" She always said yes, even though she often forgot. On those nights, she'd lie in bed staring at the empty space on her nightstand where the glass should be, feeling the absence like a missing tooth. 3 months ago, James's travel schedule increased. His firm landed a major contract, a mixed-use development project in Boston that required frequent site visits. He'd leave Monday morning, come back Friday night. The routine shifted. Sarah found herself alone more often, eating dinner by herself, watching TV shows James had no interest in, going to bed in an empty house. But even from Boston, James maintained the ritual. Sort of. He'd call her at 9:30 p.m., right before bed, and walk her through getting the water herself. "Okay, go to the kitchen," he'd say, and she could hear him smiling through the phone. "James, I know how to get water." "I know you do, but humor me. Go to the kitchen." She'd sigh, smile despite herself, and walk to the kitchen with him on speaker. "Open the fridge. Get the pitcher." "You're ridiculous. Fill the glass all the way, not that half-full nonsense you do when I'm not watching. I feel like you're remotely micromanaging my hydration." "Someone has to. Now take it upstairs, put it on the nightstand." "Is it there?" "Yes, it's there." "Good, now you're all set. I love you. Sleep well." It was silly. It was sweet. It was them. Sarah writes in her post, "I never thought much about why the ritual mattered so much to James. I just accepted it as one of his quirks, like the sock folding or the coffee mug tapping. But looking back now, I wonder if he knew something I didn't, if he was trying to prepare me for something, or if he was trying to hold on to something he felt slipping away." Music shifts, becomes slightly more ominous. 2 weeks ago, everything was normal. James came home Friday night from Boston, exhausted but happy. The project was going well. He might need to spend more time there over the next few months, possibly even consider a temporary relocation, but they'd figure it out. They had a normal weekend. Farmers market Saturday morning, movie night Saturday evening, some forgettable action thriller James picked. Sunday pancakes, slightly burned, evening walk with Pepper, and every night the glass of water appeared on Sarah's nightstand, placed there by James's careful hands. Monday morning, James left for Boston again. He'd be gone all week this time, a crucial phase of the project. Monday night, 9:30 p.m., James called. They did the water ritual over the phone. Sarah filled the glass, brought it upstairs, placed it on the nightstand. "Perfect," James said. "I'll be home Friday. Love you." "Love you too." Tuesday night, same thing. Wednesday night, same thing. Thursday night, James sounded distracted on the call. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked. "Yeah, just long day. Lots of complications on site. I'm exhausted. Do you want to skip the water thing tonight? I can handle it." "No." His voice was firm, almost urgent. "No, we do it. Go to the kitchen." They did the ritual. James seemed to relax once she confirmed the glass was on the nightstand. "James, seriously, are you okay?" A long pause. Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired. I'll see you tomorrow night. Sleep well, Sarah." "You too." That was the last normal conversation they had. Friday, Sarah had a half day at school. Teacher planning, no students. She got home around 1 p.m. James wasn't due back until evening, probably around 7 or 8 p.m., depending on traffic from Boston. She did some grading, took Pepper for a walk, started preparing dinner. Around 6 p.m., her phone rang. James. Hey, are you close? Sarah, I'm so sorry. He sounded awful, strained. The project is falling apart. Major structural issue they discovered today. I have to stay through the weekend. Probably into next week. Her heart sank. Oh, okay, that's fine. We'll manage. I know it's frustrating. I'm frustrated too. I miss you. I miss you too. It's okay, James. Work is work. I'll make it up to you, I promise. 2 weeks from now, let's go somewhere. Just us. No work. No phones. I'd like that. They talked for a few more minutes, then said goodnight. It was only 6:47 p.m., but James said he was exhausted and needed to sleep. They'd do the water ritual later, before Sarah actually went to bed. Sarah finished making dinner, just pasta for one, watched some TV, took Pepper out one more time. At 10 p.m., she headed upstairs ready for bed. She walked into the bedroom, reached for the light switch, and froze. The glass of water was already there, on her nightstand, right where it always was, full, fresh, condensation forming on the outside. Let me ask you something. You come home to an empty house, your partner's 3 states away, you haven't been upstairs since morning, and there's a glass of water on your nightstand, fresh and cold, exactly where your partner puts it every single night. What's your first thought? Is it fear? Confusion? Do you immediately think intruder? Or do you do what Sarah did? Stand there for a full 30 seconds, staring at it, trying to find a rational explanation that makes your brain feel safe? Keep that question in mind, because Sarah's reaction in this moment tells us everything about who she is and what's about to unravel. Let's continue. Sarah's first thought wasn't fear, it was confusion. She stood in the doorway of her bedroom staring at the glass, running through possibilities. Did I fill it this morning and forget? No, I specifically remember the nightstand was empty when I made the bed. Did James come home early? Surprise me? She called out, James, are you home? Silence. Just the hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the distant sound of Pepper's tags jingling as she shifted in her bed. Sarah walked to the nightstand slowly, like approaching a wild animal. She touched the glass. Cold, very cold, recently filled. She lifted it, looked underneath. Just her nightstand, same as always. A coaster, her reading lamp, the book she'd been working through for 3 weeks. Maybe I'm losing my mind. Maybe I did fill it and somehow completely blocked it out. But that didn't make sense. Sarah was meticulous, detail-oriented. It's what made her a good teacher. She noticed when students seemed off, when they needed extra help, when something wasn't quite right. She called James. It went to voicemail. She texted, Hey, weird question. Did you come home today? Like earlier, no response. She checked the doors. Front door, locked, deadbolt engaged from inside. Back door, locked, chain on. Garage, locked. All the windows, locked. She went through the house room by room. Nothing out of place. Nothing missing. No signs anyone had been there. Pepper seemed completely normal, and Pepper barked at everything. The mailman, squirrels, leaves blowing past the window. If someone had been in the house, Pepper would have lost her mind. Okay, I must have filled it. Somehow, and forgot. Sarah tried to convince herself. She got ready for bed, but she couldn't stop staring at the glass. Eventually, she dumped it out in the bathroom sink and refilled it herself, as if that would erase the wrongness of finding it there. She barely slept. Every sound in the house seemed amplified. The settling of floorboards, the wind against the windows. At one point, she could have sworn she heard footsteps on the stairs, but when she turned on every light and checked, there was nothing. Saturday morning, James finally texted back, No, still in Boston. Why, everything okay? Yeah, all fine. Just thought I heard something. Miss you. Miss you too. Should be home Tuesday now. This project is a nightmare. Sarah spent the weekend in a state of low-grade anxiety. She kept finding herself standing in the bedroom doorway, staring at the nightstand, trying to recreate her movements from Friday. Had she gone upstairs that afternoon? Had she filled the glass out of habit and forgotten? Sunday night, she decided to test herself. She deliberately did not fill the glass before bed. She wanted to see if she'd wake up Monday morning with a memory of filling it, some proof that she was experiencing gaps in her awareness. Monday morning, no glass. The nightstand was empty, just as she'd left it. Okay, so I'm not having blackouts. That's good? Monday night, she went to bed around 10:30, no glass. She'd fill it in the morning, she decided. No need to keep up the ritual when James wasn't home anyway. She woke up at 2:47 a.m. She remembers the exact time because she checked her phone. She'd had a vague, unsettling dream she couldn't quite remember. Something about water. Drowning, maybe. She turned on her bedside lamp. The glass was there. Full. Fresh. Condensation on the outside. Sarah's scream woke up Pepper, who started barking frantically. Sarah grabbed her phone, ran out of the bedroom, down the stairs, nearly tripping in her panic. She locked herself in the downstairs bathroom and called 911. The police arrived within 8 minutes. 2 officers, both professional and thorough. They searched the entire house, checked every room, every closet, the attic, the basement, checked all entry points. Everything was locked from the inside. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry, no footprints, no disturbed items, nothing. Ma'am, the older officer said gently, is there anyone else who has a key to your house? Just my husband. He's in Boston. Could he have come home without telling you? No, I talked to him earlier. He's definitely in Boston. The officers exchanged a look. The younger one spoke carefully. Is it possible you filled the glass yourself? Maybe you got up, half asleep and don't remember? No, I was asleep. And even if I did, how would I have gotten it that cold? The ice... She stopped. She hadn't checked if there was ice. She'd been too panicked. The officers waited while she went back upstairs. She examined the glass. No ice, just very cold water, like it had come straight from the fridge. Has anything like this happened before? The older officer asked. Just once. Friday night. But I convinced myself I'd done it and forgotten. The officers looked at her with a mixture of concern and skepticism. They asked about her mental health, whether she'd been under unusual stress, whether she was taking any new medications. Sarah felt herself shrinking under their gentle interrogation, feeling more and more like she was crazy, paranoid, imagining things. They left around 4 a.m., encouraging her to call if anything else happened, to consider installing a security camera, maybe talk to someone about the stress she was under. After they left, Sarah sat on her couch with all the lights on. Pepper pressed against her side and tried to think rationally. Someone has a key, someone is getting into my house and filling a glass of water on my nightstand. But why? Why would anyone do that? She thought about changing the locks, but if someone had a key, they'd know the locks had been changed. They'd know she knew. And somehow, that felt more dangerous than the current situation. She thought about staying somewhere else. Her mother's house was 40 minutes away. But what would she say? Hi, Mom, someone keeps filling a glass of water for me, and it's terrifying? It sounded insane, even in her head. At 6 a.m., she texted James. I need you to come home. He called immediately. What's wrong? Are you okay? She told him everything. The glass on Friday, the glass last night, the police. How scared she was. James was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was strange, tight. Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Pack a bag. Go to your mother's house. Right now, don't wait. James, what? Please, just trust me. Pack a bag and leave. I'm leaving Boston now. I'll be there in 3 hours. But you need to leave the house. You're scaring me. I know, I'm scared too. But please, just go to your mom's. I'll explain everything when I get there. I promise. Music builds to crescendo. Sarah packed. She grabbed Pepper, threw some clothes in a bag, and drove to her mother's house with her hands shaking so badly she almost ran a red light. Her mother, Linda, a retired nurse with the perpetual calm of someone who'd seen everything, made her tea and didn't ask too many questions. Just, James is on his way? Yes. He said he'd explain. Then we'll wait. James arrived at 11:47 a.m. Sarah had never seen him look like that. Pale, drawn, like he'd aged 5 years overnight. He hugged her so tightly she could barely breathe. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I'm so, so sorry. They sat at Linda's kitchen table. Sarah, James, and Linda. James put his head in his hands. I need to tell you something, he said. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Okay, so pause here with me for a second. What are you thinking right now? Because I read this part and immediately my brain went to affair, secret family. James has been lying about Boston, but something felt off about that explanation. James's fear seemed too genuine. His urgency was too real. And the water was too specific, too personal. It wasn't just some random intimidation tactic. It was their ritual. Someone knew about their ritual and was deliberately recreating it. That takes knowledge, intimacy, and that's what makes this so much more disturbing than a simple break-in. Hold on to that thought, because James's explanation is going to seem like it answers everything. But I'm telling you right now, this isn't the real twist. This is the false revelation, the misdirect, the thing that makes sense until you really think about it. Let's hear what James has to say. 8 years ago, James began, not looking at either of them. Before we got married, I was engaged to someone else. Sarah felt the world tilt slightly. What? Her name was Claire. We were together for 4 years, engaged for 6 months. The wedding was planned, invitation sent, and then I called it off 3 weeks before the wedding. Linda silently refilled everyone's tea. Sarah couldn't speak. I met you, James continued, and I knew. I knew Claire wasn't right, that we were wrong for each other, that I was making a terrible mistake. So I ended it, broke off the engagement. It was ugly. Claire was devastated, humiliated. Her family was furious. My family thought I was making the biggest mistake of my life. You never told me any of this. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I know. I'm sorry. I thought it was in the past, that it didn't matter. We moved, started fresh. You and me. I wanted to leave all that behind. What does this have to do with someone breaking into our house? James finally looked up. His eyes were red. Claire never really got over it. The first year after we split, she'd call me sometimes, show up places she knew I'd be. Nothing threatening, just sad, desperate, trying to get me back. Eventually, she stopped. I thought she'd moved on, but then about 6 months ago, I saw her in Boston. Sarah's stomach dropped. What? The construction site is right near where she works now. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But I saw her in a coffee shop near the site. She saw me too. We talked, just for a few minutes. I told her I was married, happy. She seemed okay. Said she was happy too, that she'd moved on. But she hadn't, Sarah said flatly. 3 weeks ago, she showed up at the construction site, asked to talk, said she'd been thinking about me, about us, asked if I was really happy with you or if I ever thought about what we could have had. I told her I was happy, that what we had was over a long time ago, that she needed to stop. James's hands were shaking. She asked about our life, about you. I didn't tell her much, but I mentioned, God, I'm so stupid. I mentioned the water glass thing. She asked about our routines, and I thought it was harmless reminiscing. So I told her about leaving you water every night, how it was our thing. Jesus Christ, James. Sarah stood up, pacing. You told your ex-fiancé about our private ritual? I know it was stupid, but I thought she was just making conversation. I never thought. He stopped. 2 weeks ago, she asked for my house key, said she'd left something at the house years ago, before we sold it, before you and I moved in together. Some family heirloom or photos, something in the attic. She wanted to check if I still had it. Please tell me you didn't give her our house key. The silence was answer enough. She said she'd drop it off in Boston when she was done. I've been waiting for her to return it, but she hasn't. And now this. James looked genuinely terrified. Sarah, I think Claire has been going into our house. I think she's been recreating the water thing, trying to mess with you, with us. Linda spoke for the first time. Have you called the police? I wanted to talk to Sarah first. I wanted to explain. I'm calling them now. I'll tell them everything. Over the next few hours, things moved quickly. James called the police, told them about Claire, the key, everything. They took a statement, got Claire's full name and last known address. An officer went to her apartment in Boston. She wasn't there. According to her landlord, she'd left 2 days ago for a vacation. Didn't say where. The police recommended changing the locks immediately, installing security cameras, possibly getting a restraining order if they could prove Claire had been entering the house. Sarah and James went home that night, together this time. A locksmith came and changed all the locks. James installed ring cameras at every entrance. They double-checked every window, every possible entry point. That night, James filled the water glass himself for the first time in a week, placed it deliberately on Sarah's nightstand. There, he said, back to normal. No more Claire. No more mysteries. They went to bed with all the new locks engaged, all the cameras active. Sarah felt herself starting to relax. It made sense now. A jilted ex-fiancé with a key, trying to mess with their relationship, trying to insinuate herself back into James's life by mimicking their intimacy. It was disturbing, yes, but it was rational, explainable, fixable. She slept better than she had in days. The next morning, James left for work. Just his regular local job. No more Boston for a while. He kissed her goodbye. I love you. I'm sorry for all of this. I love you too. We'll get through it. That night, James came home at his usual time. They made dinner together, watched TV, took Pepper for a walk. Everything felt normal again. At 10 p.m., James went to the kitchen, filled the glass from the pitcher, brought it upstairs, placed it on Sarah's nightstand. There you go, he said, kissing her forehead. Sleep well. You too. Sarah fell asleep easily, reassured by the familiar ritual, by James sleeping beside her, by the new locks and cameras protecting them. She woke up at 3:22 a.m. James was asleep next to her, snoring softly. On her nightstand were 2 glasses of water, side by side and both full, both cold, both with condensation forming. Sarah didn't scream this time. She sat up very slowly, staring at the 2 glasses. One was where James always put it. The other was positioned a few inches away, like someone had carefully placed it there to not disturb the first. She looked at James, sleeping peacefully beside her. She looked at the glasses. She looked at the bedroom door, closed and locked from the inside. Very carefully, she got out of bed, walked to the door, unlocked it, went downstairs, checked the Ring camera app on her phone. No alerts, no motion detected. No one had come in or out of the house. She went to the kitchen, opened the fridge. The water pitcher was exactly where it should be, but the level seemed lower than it had been when James filled the first glass. Sarah stood in her kitchen at 3:30 in the morning, and for the first time, she allowed herself to think the thought she'd been pushing away for days. This isn't Claire. This was never Claire. She went back upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, and finally asked the question she should have asked days ago. James, wake up. He stirred. What's wrong? How did you start the water ritual 8 years ago? How did it start? James sat up, confused. What? Sarah, it's 3 in the morning. Please, just answer the question. How did it start? He rubbed his eyes. You were sick. You had the flu. I left you water so you wouldn't have to get up. I told you this already. And after I got better, why did you keep doing it? Because I like taking care of you. We've been through this. Who taught you to do that? To leave water for someone you love? James went very still. What? It's a specific thing, James. A very specific gesture. Where did you learn it? A long silence, then. My mother used to do it. For my father. Every night. It's how I knew they loved each other, even when they fought. The water was always there. Your mother died when you were 15. Yes. And your father died 2 years later. Yes, James's voice was barely audible. James, Where are your parents buried? Oakwood Cemetery, about 10 miles from here. Why are you asking me this? Have you visited their graves recently? I... No, not in a while. Sarah, what is this about? Sarah turned on the bedside lamp, pointed to the two glasses. James stared at them. All the color drained from his face. I only filled one, he whispered. I know. Sarah, I only filled one glass. I swear to God, I only filled one. They sat there in the lamplight, staring at the two glasses, and Sarah finally said it. James, I don't think it's Claire who's been leaving the water. I don't think it's anyone alive. Long pause. That's insane, James said, but his voice shook. Is it? Think about it. The locks were always engaged from the inside. No camera alerts. Pepper never barked. The glass appears in the middle of the night, sometimes when we're both asleep in a locked room. The water is cold, fresh, like it came from our fridge, but no one is caught on camera going to our fridge. You're saying, what? A ghost? A spirit? I'm saying something we don't understand, something connected to the ritual itself. James stood up, pacing. This is crazy. There has to be a rational explanation. Maybe I'm sleepwalking. Maybe we're both. James, sit down. I need to ask you something else. He sat. 8 years ago, when you ended your engagement with Claire, when was that exactly? What month? March, mid-March. Why? And when did we start the water ritual? When you had the flu, that was also March. Late March. So within weeks of ending your engagement, within weeks of completely upending your life, you started this ritual with me. A ritual your mother used to do for your father, your dead mother. James put his head in his hands. What are you saying? I think, Sarah chose her words carefully, I think maybe you unconsciously started this ritual as a way to feel connected to your parents, to their love, to that sense of security you lost when they died. And maybe somehow that connection became real. That's insane. Then explain the glasses, James. Explain how they appear in a locked room with no one entering. Explain how Pepper doesn't bark. Explain why this only started happening when you were away, when the ritual was disrupted. They sat in silence for a long time. Then James said quietly, when I was a kid, after my mom died, I used to wake up sometimes and find things, small things, my homework organized when I'd left it messy, my favorite shirt laid out when I couldn't find it. Once after my dad died too, I woke up and someone had made my bed around me while I slept. I was 16 living with my aunt. I told her about it. She said I was dreaming. Did it ever scare you? No, it felt safe, like they were still watching over me. But it stopped after a while. By the time I was 18, it was gone completely. I convinced myself it had been grief, wishful thinking, dreams I'd mistaken for reality. What if it wasn't? Sarah, listen to yourself. You're a science teacher. You believe in evidence, in rational explanations. I teach English, not science, and I believe in evidence. The evidence is 2 glasses of water that shouldn't exist. The evidence is 8 years of an unbroken ritual that apparently matters to someone or something enough to continue it when you can't. James looked at the glasses again. So what do we do? I don't know, but I think maybe we need to visit your parents' graves. They went that morning, called in sick to their jobs, and drove to Oakwood Cemetery as soon as the gates opened. James's parents were buried side by side. Margaret Holloway, 1954 to 2003. Robert Holloway, 1952 to 2005. The graves were well maintained, though James admitted he hadn't visited in over a year. There were fresh flowers on his mother's grave. Recent, within the last few days. Did you leave these? Sarah asked. No, maybe the cemetery does maintenance. They asked the groundskeeper. He shook his head. Family usually brings flowers. We don't do that. Has anyone been visiting these graves recently? The groundskeeper consulted his log. Someone comes every week, signs in as family, doesn't leave a name. James and Sarah looked at each other. They sat by the graves for a long time. Finally, James spoke out loud, feeling foolish but desperate. Mom? Dad? If you're if you're somehow doing this, if you're trying to help or watch over us or something, I need you to know. I appreciate it. I do. But you're scaring Sarah. You're scaring both of us. And I need it to stop. Please, I love you. I miss you. But I'm okay now. We're okay. You can rest. You can let go. Nothing happened. Birds sang in the trees. A light breeze rustled the leaves. They went home feeling ridiculous and emotionally drained. That night, James filled the water glass as usual, placed it on Sarah's nightstand. They went to bed. In the morning, there was only one glass, the one James had left. It didn't happen again. Not that night, not the next week, not ever again. The second glass never appeared. The ritual went back to normal. James filling one glass, placing it on Sarah's nightstand, their small nightly gesture of love. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that something had been there, watching over them, ensuring that even when James couldn't perform the ritual, it would continue, and that somehow James's words at the grave had released them, released whatever presence had been trying to maintain that connection. Okay, I need you to sit with this for a moment because this is where the story could end, right? James's dead parents watching over him, making sure his wife was cared for even when he was away. It's beautiful in a way. Eerie, yes, but ultimately loving, protective. And maybe that is the truth. Maybe that's all it was. But here's what kept me up at night after reading this story. That explanation works perfectly. Too perfectly. It ties everything up in a bow. And life, real life, doesn't usually work that way. There's always loose threads, always questions that don't quite fit. And Sarah had those questions too. She had one question in particular that she couldn't let go of. And when she finally looked for the answer, when she finally pulled that thread, the whole story unraveled into something much darker. Something that makes me question everything we just heard. Are you ready? Because this is the real twist. Hello? Is this Sarah Holloway? Yes, who is this? My name is Detective Rachel Kwan with the Boston Police Department. I'm calling about Claire Morrison. I understand you filed a report about her a few weeks ago? Sarah's heart sank. Yes, has something happened? We found her. Well, we found her car, abandoned in a parking garage near the waterfront. We're treating it as a missing persons case. When was the last time you or your husband had contact with her? My husband spoke to her about a month ago, maybe a little more. She asked for his house key and he gave it to her. He told the police all of this when we filed the report. Right, I'm looking at that report now. Ms. Morrison asked for a house key, said she wanted to retrieve something from a property she thought he still owned? Yes. Can you confirm what property that was? I don't know. James said it was from before we were together. A house he and Claire shared, I think? A pause on the line. Mrs. Holloway, did your husband tell you that he and Claire Morrison lived together? Well, they were engaged. I assumed. According to our records, James Holloway and Claire Morrison never cohabited. They both maintained separate residences throughout their relationship. I'm looking at Claire's rental history and your husband's property records. There's no overlap. Sarah's mouth went dry. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe. One more question. Did James mention where he was when Claire approached him about the key? At the construction site in Boston, where he's been working. Another pause. Longer this time. Mrs. Holloway, I've spoken with the project manager at that site. James Holloway hasn't been assigned to that project in over 8 months. He was temporarily consulted last year, but he hasn't worked there since March. The kitchen seemed to tilt. That's not possible. He's been going to Boston every week for months. For that project. I can only tell you what the project manager told me. Perhaps you should speak with your husband. After the detective hung up, Sarah sat very still. Then she opened her laptop and did something she'd never done before. She looked at their bank statements. Really looked at them. James's paychecks from his firm were consistent, normal, But there were other deposits, large ones, every 2 weeks, from a company called Clearwater Property Management. She Googled it. Property management firm in Boston. Rental properties, she called them. Clearwater Property Management. How can I help you? Hi, I'm calling about payments being made to James Holloway. Are you the tenant or the owner? I'm his wife. I'm trying to verify some information. I see. Let me pull up the account. Okay, yes, Mr. Holloway receives bi-weekly payments for the rental income from his property at 847 Riverside Drive in Boston. Is there a problem with the payments? No, no problem. Thank you. Sarah hung up, opened Google Maps, typed in 847 Riverside Drive, Boston. It was a small house, 2 bedrooms, nice neighborhood. The listing photos showed it was furnished, well-maintained. She called James at work. Hey, sweetheart, what's up? I need you to come home, right now. Is everything okay? I don't know, but you need to come home, please. James got home in 20 minutes. Sarah was waiting at the kitchen table with her laptop open. You own a house in Boston, she said flatly. James went white. Sarah, 847 Riverside Drive. You've owned it for 8 years. You rent it out. You've been collecting rental income that you've never mentioned to me. I can explain. You told me you've been in Boston for work, but you haven't been assigned to that project in 8 months. So where have you been going every week? James sat down heavily. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, the house was my parents' house. They left it to me when they died. I couldn't sell it. It was the only thing I had left of them. So I kept it. Rented it out. The income helped me get through grad school. Why didn't you tell me? Because, he looked up at her, and there were tears in his eyes. Because I haven't been renting it out. Not for the last 5 months. I've been living there. Part-time. Sarah felt the ground drop out from under her. You've been living in Boston? Not full-time, just, sometimes. When I need space. When things feel too overwhelming. What things, James? Our marriage? No. God, no. I love you. I love our life. But sometimes I feel like I'm drowning. Like I can't breathe. And I go there, to my parents' house, and I can just exist without having to be anyone or do anything. It's the only place I've ever felt completely safe. You've been lying to me for 5 months about where you are, what you're doing. I know. I know it was wrong. I'm sorry. I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. Sarah's mind was racing. The water glasses, when did they start appearing? Sarah, we established that was my parents. When, James? Exactly when? He thought about it. 5 months ago, when I started spending time in Boston. So the glasses started appearing when you started your secret double life. It's not a double life. I'm not having an affair. I'm not doing anything wrong. I just need space sometimes. And Claire? Was that all a lie too? No, Claire is real. She does work in Boston. I did see her. Everything I told you about that was true. But the key, you didn't give her our house key. You gave her the key to your Boston house. James was silent. Why, James? Why would you give your ex-fiancée a key to a house you've been secretly living in? Because, his voice broke, because I wanted to see if she'd come, if she still cared, if there was still something there. Sarah started to cry. Not from fear this time, from betrayal, from the realization that everything, the water glasses, the mystery, the supposed paranormal activity, it had all been covering a much more mundane, much more painful truth. So there never was a ghost, she said quietly. There never were your parents watching over us. It was you. It was always you. Sarah, I don't understand. The glasses. You were filling them. You'd sneak back from Boston into our house and fill the glasses to maintain the ritual so I wouldn't know you were gone. So I wouldn't realize you were living a separate life in Boston. What? No, I was in Boston when you found the first glass. I couldn't have. You own a house there. A house with furniture, with everything you need. You've been going back and forth for months. You could have driven back, filled the glass, driven back to Boston. It's only a 3-hour drive. You could have done it in the middle of the night. You could have. Sarah, stop. I didn't do that. I swear on my parents' graves, I didn't do that. They stared at each other across the kitchen table. Then who did? Sarah whispered. If it wasn't you, and it wasn't Claire, and it wasn't your parents' ghosts, then who has been filling those glasses? And that's the question that haunts Sarah to this day, because 2 days later, she got another call from Detective Kwan. They'd found Claire Morrison. She'd been in a psychiatric facility in Western Massachusetts for the past 6 weeks. Voluntary commitment for severe depression and anxiety. She'd never been to Portland, never entered their house, never left a single glass of water, and James still maintains, that he never snuck back to fill the glasses. He took a polygraph to prove it. He passed. So who was it? Sarah writes in her final update. I don't know what's real anymore. James and I are in couples therapy. He's given up the Boston house, sold it finally 3 weeks ago. He swears he'll never lie to me again, and I want to believe him. I'm trying to believe him. But here's what I know. The glasses stopped appearing after we visited his parents' graves. Completely stopped. Whatever it was, paranormal presence, James's unconscious sleepwalking, some explanation we haven't thought of. It ended that day. James thinks it proves it was his parents, that they were watching over us, and when he told them it was okay to let go, they did. I don't know what I think anymore. I don't know if I believe in ghosts or if I believe in my husband. I don't know which option is more terrifying. But I do know this. Every night James still fills a glass of water and puts it on my nightstand. And every morning I wake up and check to make sure there's only one. So far there always is. But I check. Every single morning I check. So there you have it. The story of Sarah and James and the water glasses that shouldn't exist. I've thought about this story for days since reading it, tried to work out what really happened. And the truth is, I can't. None of the explanations fit perfectly. If it was James, the polygraph and the timing don't work. If it was Claire, the psychiatric facility proves she couldn't have been there. If it was ghost, well, that requires accepting something most of us aren't ready to accept. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the real horror isn't the supernatural possibility. It's the realization that the person you love most in the world can have entire parts of their life you know nothing about, that you can share a bed with someone every night, perform intimate rituals together, build a whole life together, and still be fundamentally unknown to each other. James was living a double life, sort of. Not an affair, not a traditional betrayal, but a secret life nonetheless. A place he went to escape the life he'd built with Sarah. And Sarah never knew until something inexplicable forced the truth into the light. The water glasses, real or imagined, paranormal or mundane, were a symptom of a deeper problem. James's inability to fully commit, to fully trust Sarah with his whole self. His need to keep one foot in his past, in his parents' house, in a version of himself that existed before Sarah. And the saddest part? The ritual that was supposed to represent his love for Sarah, his care for her, his presence in her life, it became the thing that revealed his absence. Here's what I want you to think about. How well do we really know the patterns of our own lives? How many rituals do we perform without understanding why we started them or what they really mean? And how many parts of ourselves do we keep hidden from the people who love us, telling ourselves it's for their own good, when really it's because we're afraid of being fully known? Sarah checks every morning for a second glass. She doesn't know if she's watching for ghosts or for signs that her husband is lying again. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's neither. Maybe she's just watching for proof that she can trust her own perception of reality. Have you ever had a moment like that? Where something small, a misplaced item, a strange coincidence, a detail that doesn't quite fit, made you question everything you thought you knew about your life or your partner? Have you ever found out that someone you loved was living a secret you never suspected? I don't have answers. I'm not sure there are any. But I think about Sarah checking that nightstand every morning, and my heart breaks for her. Because once you start checking, once you stop taking the pattern for granted, you can never go back to the comfortable certainty you had before. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to this story with me. I know it's not the resolution you wanted. It's not the resolution I wanted either. But sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that don't resolve. The ones that leave you checking over your shoulder, questioning what you thought you knew, wondering what patterns in your own life might be hiding secrets you're not ready to face. Hit that like button if this story messed with your head the way it messed with mine. Subscribe for more psychological deep dives into the strange and unexplainable. And let me know in the comments, what do you think really happened? Was it ghosts? Was it James lying about the polygraph? Was it something else entirely? Or maybe the better question is, does it matter? Because either way, Sarah's life is fundamentally changed. Either way, the pattern is broken. Either way, she'll never look at that glass of water the same way again. Take care of yourselves. Pay attention to the patterns. And maybe think twice before building your love on rituals you don't fully understand. I'll see you in the next one.